Welcome back to Forex Focus, brought to you by tastyfx. We've got a fun segment for you today, taking a look at 10 countries where the US dollar is the strongest. Today, for the point of our analysis, we're going to be taking a look at nominally where one US dollar can get you the most of another country's currencies. And this list is not all inclusive of every country in the world. We're taking a look at mainly exchange rates that are popular amongst forex traders, liquid markets, and so excluding some really volatile currencies, but still a robust list and some key takeaways. Let's dive right into it. Coming in at number 10, we've got Denmark, the Danish krone, one US dollar getting you about 6.7 Danish kroner. And this, if we look at this graph over the past 5 years, which is what we're going to be looking at time frame wise, because a lot of the storylines we've been seeing have been pandemic, post-pandemic, and how countries are coming out of this post-pandemic. The U.S. obviously one of the strongest, but it'll be really clear and easy to tell as we go through these just how different chronologically some of these exchange rates are fluctuating based on a country's economic performance, how high their inflation got. Inflation globally got really high out there in 2022 and domestically here in the U.S. as well. But some of those timelines are really interesting. So here, especially, you're seeing coming out of the pandemic, on the onset of the pandemic, the Danish krone actually appreciating against the US dollar. That's not a trend you'll see a lot as we go through these, just because the US dollar was such a safe haven currency for a lot of emerging markets. And this Danish krone was able to appreciate early on, but then lost a lot of ground as that 2022 dollar bull run really took over. You'll see that in all of these. But that's where we're starting. Number 9, jumping over to China, looking at the offshore yuan, one US dollar getting you about 7 offshore yuan. This exchange rate, we saw a big dollar pop there in 2022, but really staying at the top of this trading range above 7 as China has not been able to come out of this pandemic from an economic growth standpoint as the U.S. has done. So one U.S. dollar getting you 7 offshore yuan there. Jumping to number 8, we're back in the Nordic countries, looking at Sweden, the Swedish krona, one U.S. dollar getting you about 10 Swedish krona. And so this one, similar to the Danish krone, appreciating in 2021, but then 2022 and for the past 2 years trading in a new range coming out of that pandemic, still above 10 here. And that will lead us right into number 7, the neighboring Norwegian kroner, the last of the krone variants for this list, and these Nordic countries. So really interesting to see that Sweden and Norway, you'd expect their currencies to move pretty much pretty similarly, but Denmark being a differentiator and stronger relative to these other 2 Nordic countries. Then jumping down at number 6 to South Africa, the South African rand, one US dollar getting you over 17 South African rands. And like we've seen in a lot of these, well, differently than we've seen in some of those Nordic currencies, we saw a big pop in favor of the US dollar on the onset of the pandemic, coming back a little bit in 2021, but after 2022, really establishing this new trading range given the robust dollar strength and U.S. outperformance. But now that the U.S. is looking at some rate cuts coming down a little bit, but all-time highs hit in 2023. So definitely now more than ever, if you're a a traveler or a trader. Definitely the top of the range here still in this US dollar South African rand pair. Moving on to number 5, we have Mexico, the Mexican peso coming in at 1 US dollar, getting you almost 20 Mexican pesos. And this is an interesting one. The graph tells you some story, but doesn't tell you the whole story. If you back this up, the lows we hit in USD MXN early this year were around 9-year lows. And so a really interesting trend. The Mexican peso profiting a lot off of the recent nearshoring trend we've seen as U.S. companies move some of their factories from further locations such as China and other Asian countries to the neighboring, to Mexico, to try and benefit from reduced transportation costs and various other factors. So we have seen a very strong Mexican peso recently, but coming off the back of a historic election in Mexico in June, seeing a supermajority in their ruling party, a lot more uncertainty coming this summer, as we've just really seen that U.S. dollar pop against the Mexican peso, now back up to near 20 to 1, as we saw earlier in 2021 and even before the pandemic. Moving on to number 4, we're in the Czech Republic. This is a koruna, so I misspoke earlier. So this is another krone variant, but stepping further away from those Nordic countries. 1 US dollar getting you 22.56 Czech koruna, and this has had a really volatile trading range back and forth over the past 3 or 4 years, but still kind of range bound above 20, and so just under 23. We're in the middle of that range. And this story, as much as all of these have been very dollar dictated, this story also factoring in a lot of hyperinflation and perhaps some political instability in the Czech Republic. Jumping to number 3, we have the most interesting chart of this 10, in my opinion. I mean, really not a lot of red there. Most red on the border of this graph, as this Turkish lira really has not put up a fight in these recent years. US dollar just continuing through new all-time highs, now above 34 to 1 Turkish lira to US dollars, as this story definitely dictated by a lot of hyperinflation and inability from Turkey's central bank to reel that in, astronomical interest rates as well, but nothing really clicking for this Turkish lira. And the jump is even bigger to number 2. We have the Japanese yen, and while the last graph might have been the most surprising, this country might be the most surprising because, as we know, Japan is one of these economic powerhouses, top economy worldwide, GDP-wise, but really in a whole new trading range over the past couple years here, and now down, but coming off of 30, near 40-year highs at that 160 to 1 US dollar, getting you 160 Japanese yen. And so we're still very historically high in this trading range. Long-term averages resting a lot closer to 110, 120. So even though we've seen this sharp dip lower, a big storyline surrounding here, as many of you well know, has been the interest rate differential. US dollar or US central bank hiking interest rates north of 5%. Japan through this time period not hiking at all, keeping rates sub-zero, and just recently getting out of that negative territory, hence some of this price action as a popular carry trade destination for traders who were looking to capitalize on this rate differential. And we have more on that in another video. But that takes us to number one, the Hungarian forint, getting you $1 getting you over 350 Hungarian forints, and that's not even the worst that it's been. At times in the past few years, you could have gotten over 400 Hungarian forints for just $1. So historically still very high. Definitely not the top in this, but really astronomically different from if we zoom out and look at all of these. I mean, you think about the major currency pairs, a lot of those kind of around 1-to-1, 1-to-2, thinking about the euro, the pound, and Australian dollar. These all much higher, a big leg above, but then even going from 1 to 2 to 3, the difference there nominally really drastic, as 1 to 2 is over 200 places different in what $1 can get you. And so if we start thinking about this from a geographic standpoint, you're really getting the most bang for your buck in Europe, outside the Eurozone, and in Asia, as we see the Japanese yen and the yuan on this list, but a lot of those smaller European countries, Nordic or in Eastern Europe. And then, yeah, a big caveat here is a lot of these South American currencies and countries excluded from this list due to their kind of illiquidity from a market's perspective. But if you're a traveler, definitely worth looking into what you can get in some of those countries. But there you have it. There's an overview on 10 of the strongest 10 countries where the US dollar is the strongest, whether you're a trader or a traveler. Worth knowing the context around these last couple years and just how much your dollar's worth. Thanks for watching.